Hey, it is Saturday, February 14th, 2026. Happy Frederick Douglass's birthday. Allegedly, or decidedly, he got to decide his own birthday since he didn't know what it was, but February 14th is what he decided to celebrate. Um, we're seeing fewer reportings over the last couple of days after the drawdown of Metro Storm. Still quite a few on Thursday, fewer yesterday. We're keeping an eye out today. And will, I think, for the next couple of weeks. I think some of the things that we saw, other than pretty large and present forces on the first half of this last week, are that there's lots of reports of changing tactics, lots of undercover, lots of modifying vehicles with putting stuff on the dashboards, putting stickers, bumper stickers, window stickers, and then using either rentals or cars that feel more in line with the community, so things that are a bit less obvious than big new Ford trucks. We also saw several dozen new Ford trucks being driven into the Whipple building, I think, Thursday. So there's still obviously things going on here. I think Fort Snelling is still intended to be used for a long term base or hub. So even as we look to the metrics that we're seeing reported to determine whether they actually are drawing down Metro Storm, at least in effect for the next couple of days, I think it's very much on everybody's mind that this is not going away for the longer term. And we have a few good reasons to believe that. I think that the most important reason that we have to believe that, I'm going to quote Heather Cox Richardson a couple of times here because I think, again, her summaries are really good at looking at the broader picture. Um, ICE is funded, even with the DHS funding bill that did not get approved yesterday by Congress. ICE is still fully funded through September of 2029. So while the DHS funding bill does put some heat on the Republican administration to determine how they're going to continue funding things like the TSA, things like FEMA, anything else that falls under DHS, ICE has the funding they need to continue wielding and waging a full on war against the American people. And I say war because they're the fifth largest army in terms of funding in the world, after like the United States military and a couple other sovereign militaries. ICE is so big and has so much money that it is ridiculous, even with kind of the small legislative victories that we can get here. So I'm going to focus on one news story published by Reuters, and it is really focused on a document that was published by the New Hampshire Governor's Office that's outlining how ICE intends to spend that money. And they plan to spend $38.3 billion this year on centers for detention and processing. So a bit more of the summary there. We're looking at 8 large detention centers and 16 regional processing centers. The large detention centers are intended to be warehouses that hold up to 10,000 people, which is far larger than the largest jails in or prisons in the United States. And the regional processing centers are intended to be able to detain at any point 1,000 to 1,500 people. Practically speaking, what we're seeing for this is not just new build outs, but we're also seeing a lot of warehouse space, which was heavily invested in by the corporate sector, especially over the COVID era. Warehouse space was at a premium as the world really moved towards remote shipping for a lot of the goods and services, especially here in the United States. I think Heather Cox Richardson did a good job of explaining what these detention centers are. They're concentration camps. It is a night and day implementation of concentration camps, which historically are any camps used to detain a population of people that are deemed a law enforcement threat. And that's exactly the rhetoric that we see pushed down by the federal administration. Domestic terrorists, assault on ICE officers. It's all these phrases that are disingenuous or straight up fallacious that are being levied. And while the first year of this second Trump term really screwed over our brains in terms of just accepting that we're not going to get truth, I don't think enough people have really realized that if you can't get the truth from somebody, you can't believe anything that they say at all, ever. And unfortunately, they have the power of the record, right? They can put down domestic terrorism or assault on officers, make up all sorts of shit. And unless somebody has them on video demonstrably lying, it gets very hard for somebody to defend themselves, especially if they are in a vulnerable population. So yeah, it's it's nice to have a moment or two to breathe here, but whew, those breaths get a little shorter when I start looking at what the reality is for now the rest of the country. If Operation Metro Storm is really, or Surge is really drawing down, well, they're still hiring like crazy, and these people are going to spill out into other states. So I can only hope that we did enough to get the word out about what's going on here so that y'all can prepare.